Hello, and welcome to another episode of my Devil May Cry painting series. Today, I'll be working on the Riot, a reptilian enemy that you encounter several times throughout the game. I start, like every other time, by trimming the model's mold lines. They're found prominently around the face, including the jaw and tongue. You'll find many mold lines on the spines, as well as on the barb on the tail. Be sure not to trim down any of the purposefully made flutes, which are raised lines that you can find throughout the body that glow while the Riot is fighting. I prime my model with matte black, and here you can see I kind of went overboard with the primer. It becomes glossy and a little too caked on, but that's alright. I don't really lose any detail in this particular instance. I take my alien purple and I begin to base paint the shell that makes up a large portion of the Riot's top half of its body. This shell goes over the entire back, up the tail, covering the barb, and even his gross snake-like head. There are these weird plates on the creature's legs that, while in the game are represented as the same color as the rest of the lower half of the body, I choose to color purple just because I feel like that would bring a little more life to the model. Next, I take my ash gray and I cover the entirety of the rest of the body. The Riot has a snake-like exterior with several scales. The texturing is pretty good, and I'll come back later and highlight it with a dry brush. But for right now, you have to make sure that you get all those tough to get to spots, such as under the jaw and the belly and the chest of the creature. Next, I take my alien purple and mix it with a little bit of Kraken blue to paint the weird spines that go up its back. I also use this color to paint the tail's barb and kind of let it fade out towards the tail. Next up, Cambrian Crimson. I go ahead and I give it a little bit of a mani-pedi and color all the claws red. And then I follow that up by beginning to go up the weird lines. I call them flutes, but I'm not 100% sure what they're called, that go up its body. You can find several of these on its legs, arms, the sides of its body. These things glow during combat and kind of give it a bit more character than just being a big lizard. I carefully use the side of my brush to try to fill it in. I fill in the eye socket. There's lots of baggy flesh around its eyeball that you have to make nice and red. I also fill in the large gaps that go around the barb of the tail. There's a couple other detailed lines on its head that I decide to fill in with red. I feel like it gives it more character and stands out a bit more. Next up, I take my frost blue and decide to go back and paint the tongue. I'd originally used my purple-blue mixture, but I feel like the frost blue better represents it. I take my shadow wash, and with a 1-to-1 mixture of wash and water, cover the entirety of the model with this dark wash. You can see with the lizard's snake-like body, the wash fills in very well, making all of the scales stick out more, as well as giving it a bit of the dark, demonic look that we expect from the Devil May Cry monsters. This took me quite some time to fill out the entirety of the surface area. That's alright. As long as I have more wash, you can just keep going. I fill in the eyes, the scales, the head. You gotta be a bit careful on the scales because it's very easy for the wash to begin to pool and collect in spots you may not want them in the square, almost like compartmentalized pieces of scales on its back. You can fix this by simply taking your brush and guiding the wash away from parts you don't want them to collect in. Don't forget the barb. The plates on its legs fill out nicely as well. After drying, you can see the effect. It kind of looks a little dirty or dusty. That's alright. I come back with a bit of skeleton bone to give the creature's teeth a bit of dental work. Its bottom jaw, split into two sections, has 2 rows of teeth on each side, and 1 row of teeth on the top jaw. My model came with a couple missing teeth, and the top jaw only had about 4 or 5 actual teeth, but that may do. I return with my alien purple and begin highlighting all of the carapace-like scales. I try to do just the lower parts of the long scales to make it seem like they're catching the light a little better. You won't see too much of a difference, but you can return with a bit of purple mixed with a lighter color, such as white or a lighter variation of purple you might have. I just go over it once with the purple to highlight. I catch any raised parts, such as the lines that go over the creature's face, and kind of highlight its angular head. Now, this part took me a little while, but I went ahead and I edge highlighted each scale that goes over the creature's entire back. You could do this individually, or you can take a dry brush and go back and catch all of the raised portions. The way that the creature scales are organized make it perfect for a dry brush treatment. With all the different raised portions, you can go ahead and catch the edges very easily. Next up, I take my ash gray back out, and then grab my dry brush in order to give it a quick once over with a very light bit of gray. Now, to dry brush, you make sure that you remove most of the paint off of the dry brush with a paper towel or a piece of tissue. Because of the creature's snake hide, you can very easily catch just the raised sections as you very lightly go over its body. I even go a little over the flutes, but I fix that later with another coat of red. You mostly just catch the top parts of the creature and you'll go ahead and be right as rain. Here I consider to kind of dry brush the entire shell with this gray to make it look more like the model's washed out look, but I opt out of it. Go back with the red, highlight those claws and any of the flutes that might have lost their color with the wash. You gotta be very careful, but if it gets on the scales, it's not the worst problem in the world. It just makes it seem like it's glowing or spreading further than the creature's biology would say. Go back and fix any of the flutes that kind of had any gray on them from the dry brush. Very simple fix. And it really brings those reds to life. Go back, touch the eyes up, as well as the barb. It's a little hard to get in there, but that's alright. I take out a angelic yellow to fill in the creature's eyes. You don't have to be too precise, because for the most part you'll be looking at this creature from a downward perspective. But I fill in both eye sockets with a bit of yellow, not taking up all the red, but enough to show that there are eyes somewhere in there. Come back with a bit of white. Just to dot the eye, I take a detail brush with a very thin point. I don't water this down and just get the slightest bit on the tip of my brush and kind of dot the eye. It's in there somewhere, it's very tiny. smaller than a tooth on the creature. This will give the eyeball just that tiny bit of detail that you need. I decide that the creature is good to go, and I wrap it up. I had some trouble painting this model because I couldn't quite pick a color palette for it because of how inconsistent it appears in-game with different lightings and environments. I feel like the creature can now stand out properly on the board, so I call it quits there. Next video, I'll paint the Proto-Angelo. Like and subscribe to follow my paint series. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.